Hi, my name is Emily Morris Piltzer. I run the Bookstagram page Literary Views. I've also started doing literary dinners, and I run the Brickle Book Club. And I'm so happy to be here with Jenny at Miami Lit.
Hi everybody, my name is Jenny. Welcome to Miami Lit Podcast. I'm super excited to have a new friend here today, Emily from Literary Views. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I was telling you earlier, so I'll repeat myself. I was so happy to find your account on Instagram. I was like, I can't believe there's someone else that enjoys books and they live here. I was so happy. And the fact that you're here, I'm like,
No, are you kidding? This is my first podcast ever, so I'm really nervous but excited. But Literary Reviews has been such a great way to meet people like you, like that are creative and that have projects and that are interesting in all things worldly. So I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear more about it, and I'm super happy that you're here. So let's get started. I have so many questions, as you know. Let's go with Literary Views first.
Okay.
Where was this born? How did this come into fruition? It's such a cool concept.
Thank you. Well, Literary Views was definitely my lockdown project.
Mm-hmm.
I suddenly felt like so many of us that I had a lot more time on my hands, and I think that was a time when all of us were trying to turn to hobbies or things that we enjoyed and wanted to do more of it, right? Like people were asking all over the internet for movie recommendations, show recommendations, book recommendations. And up till then, I really didn't consider myself a social media person at all. I still barely do. I really think I'm winging it. But I did follow a few book accounts, and I was discovering this concept of Bookstagram.
Right.
And so I was like, well, people need recommendations. I'm just going to do it and try. And if it fails, no one's going to know.
That's true.
It's really not going to be a huge deal, and it'll be fun, at least, to have something going.
Right.
And I think it just spiraled from there in the sense that it started by being a really fun project for me to take photos and to share my love of books. And then I started to see the potential in connecting me with people that have those similar interests, and then starting to see how the publishing industry works, starting to just be aware of all this literary universe that existed. Right. So that's definitely a lot of the power of social media as well. But that's how it started, a little lockdown baby, and that's morphed into so much more now.
That's amazing. It's so cool to think that something as scary as a lockdown provided such a positive outlet.
Yeah.
I love that.
And something that I've seen across the board for all of my friends, whether they pursue them or not, I feel like I know all of my friends so much more because of the lockdown and what project they decided to pursue, aside from Instagram pages. But even with those, I had friends who started pages for healthy eating, for coffee, for yoga, and all across the board, I just started to see, okay, I know them in their typical 9-to-5 routine, or I know them in their typical hobbies, but who are these people when you remove all of those external kind of
That's
impulses?
So true.
And suddenly I was like, wow, I mean, little details, right, that I would know. Like I mentioned, right? Oh, this friend likes yoga. Suddenly turned into wow, they actually know a lot about this, and they're really good at teaching it. And then it just kind of morphed into everything. And since we all had so much more time, it felt like we could all be much more supportive of each other as well. Right? Because we were all looking for not distractions, but things to do. So all of a sudden, your network around you, and I mean, I'm also very lucky, I have very supportive friends, but all of a sudden they also had the time to be there for each other. So I think
and
it was
explore all these
time.
different areas of your life that you otherwise you never have the time to do.
And we're still hearing it. People that had, we were talking about an existential crisis earlier. Yeah. People that kind of had an existential crisis with COVID, and now are starting to re-look at their life and their life path and trying to decide ultimately who do you want to be, and
That's true.
How can you get there with little steps without, necessarily radically changing your life from one day to the next.
That's so true. And I love that you brought up your going for books. You could have done so many things, to help yourself and the people that needed it, but you chose books. So let's take that route. When did you first start reading?
I've really always been a reader. I'm very lucky because my family is very creative. Everybody reads, and everybody really has a love for learning. So my grandmother was always a huge reader. She's the one that, ever since I was a kid, would take me to bookstores. When I was in college, she had a rule when I would visit her, I could only and had to pick 20 books to take home.
That's
and
amazing.
It was like no less. And so I would be lugging like my carry-on back to college just full of books. But I think that helped a lot. My grandfather has always really been interested in journalism as well, and is very focused on this idea that you should always be a continuous learner and that you should stay perpetually curious. And so he'll be in his 80s and find out about new trends with youngsters or, you know, new ways of doing business, and will dive into the topic and will learn as much as he can, and will talk about it with people around him. Same thing with my parents. Both of my parents have always worked in the art and design worlds. My father has always been a huge reader, my mother as well. And I think that I've also been very lucky that they've exposed me to travel, to art, and all of that just kind of gets your brain going constantly. And I think that when you're used to being exposed to new ideas so constantly, you crave it. And I think that that's what a lot of us that are interested in reading miss when we don't read. Like, we miss seeing another world, seeing another country, seeing another way of living, real or not, right?
Yeah,
like fiction or
seeking
nonfiction.
those experiences.
Yeah.
And it's so true that you point out that correlation between travelers and readers, because usually people that enjoy travel and seeking out experiences are most of the time readers as well.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, for example, like when you go into a bookstore, what do you do? How do you go? Where do you go to pick your book, basically? What's your process?
Me? Oh my God. Okay, so I walk in and then I like a, you know, like a little kid, like, I'm like, okay, like, where do I go? What do I want to do? And then I have like a 5 minutes of like just going nuts, and then I'm like, okay, no, calm down. What did you come here for? What's your purpose? Stick to that. So over the last couple of years, every time I go into the bookstore, I always think like, okay, what are you going in there for? Because otherwise I would be lost for hours and hours, and I won't know what happened. Like, all of a sudden I'll look up and it's sundown and I have no idea. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no.
But yes, I try to go in with like an idea. Okay, I'm craving this kind of book or this kind of author, so I'll go that way and try not to deviate too much, because otherwise I'll walk out with like your grandmother, 20 books I have to bring home. Yeah.
Well, I'm asking too because I think what you mentioned about travelers is such a good point. Like, for a couple years, I remember that I would go in and try to find stories about the most exotic places or countries that I just knew nothing about. And whether it was fiction or nonfiction, I just feel like I discovered so much of the world thanks to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you really get to appreciate the differences, I feel like, in people and cultures, in everything. It's just, it really opens your mind and your soul, I feel like not to get too deep, but it does shape you.
And we were talking about it the other day because one of my favorite genres to read is memoirs. And one common theme that you see in memoirs, but also in fiction novels in general, will be that if there's somebody that's trying to break out of a routine, break out of their environment, or kind of craft a different life for themselves, they're always readers.
Yeah.
And you hear these stories and you read these stories of, and it can be anything from breaking out of poverty, right? I started going to the library and I started reading and I started seeing that there were other ways of being. Yeah. And I think that that's what's the key. Like, it just opens you up to different worlds, different ways of thinking, and different possibilities. And that's the power of education in general, right? Like, education teaches you how to think critically so that you can constantly seek to see, okay, this is my reality right now, but is this everybody's reality?
Right.
And is this the reality that I'm bound to?
Exactly.
And reading opens that up because it will make you ask questions that you probably didn't even know to ask in the beginning, right? Because there's just
it offers options
so much
that you
there.
Probably had no idea was even an option to begin with. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because in the age of social media, we're going to these accounts for inspiration, and those they feel kind of empty. I don't know if that makes sense to you. As opposed to when you're inspired by a book, it feels like there's a different experience.
I definitely agree with the different experience side of it.
Right.
And I mean, what I like about social media really is that, first of all, as I was mentioning before, it connects you.
Oh,
really,
for
right?
sure.
Like, it
Yeah.
connects you to so
I would have
many
never
things.
found you had it
Yeah.
not been for social media. So it's not to
And-
say it's bad, you guys. We like social media.
And I mean, the visual side of it, you find people that are doing amazing work.
Yes.
And this is really their only outlet to see it. So sometimes
Right.
it's a great source of inspiration. But on the plus side, and I see this especially coming from an angle where I work in news, and we will work on and develop stories for days on end, and then you see social media, which again is positive and negative, right? But
Right.
they can come out with stories much faster than you can. You'll get these updates, and you get almost like too much information at once. So I think it's that delicate balance between
Yeah.
finding inspiration from it, but also not letting yourself get lost in it.
I
Because
think that's the key.
there's no filtering on social media. I mean,
Right.
it's filtered to you, right? Which is
Right.
also its own danger. But you can be exposed to too much as well.
Right.
And you also don't need to hear everybody's opinion, to be perfectly honest.
That's true.
Like, it's nice to be able to have these platforms where people can share them, and it's good to read them, but that doesn't mean you need to take them all to heart, and that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that their opinion is worth anything. And that goes for everybody. It goes for
Right.
leaders, it goes for political figures. Like,
Right.
even when I see some of the interviews that we do when we work in news and we're kind of asking people, so what do you think? What do you think? Sometimes it's nice to hear, and because they'll give you ideas that you probably hadn't thought of, but sometimes it's just that. It's just their opinion. And it's
Right.
really hard with social media to kind of step aside from those, I think.
That's true. It's difficult to gauge how much weight you want to put into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially since lockdown, where all of a sudden we were on our phones so much, or phone screens in general. Like, you always see jokes now about, like, oh, working from home is literally going from, like, my computer screen to my phone
Yeah.
screen to my TV screen.
It's
So
true.
it's hard, which is also why books are a nice break from that. Literally just even on your eyes. Like, I feel like it's a different color page. Like, I feel that it's a good break from the
Right.
whirlwind of the internet.
Mentioning screens, do you use e-readers?
No, I have
Me neither.
such a hard time with it. I really wish also for travel, because it's
Yeah.
so practical to just have everything in one. And I've tried so hard, and all of my friends that are really big ebook readers, like whether they do it on their iPads, their phones, Kindles, I just can't. I forget about it too. Like, I'll
Right.
start a book on it if I'm on a train or something, and I have really nothing with me. But as soon as I get off that train, it's gone. It's done.
That's I've had that same experience. So I'm kind of happy that you say that, because I thought it was just me.
No.
'Cause I see like a lot of my friends, they all enjoy what's that popular one, the white paper or something. See, I don't even know what it's
Yeah.
called. That's how much attention I,
don't know
pay.
either.
It's like Amazon, some Kindle
Okay, the
white.
Kindle, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. And I've tried, and it doesn't work.
Yeah,
It doesn't
me
work.
neither.
I'd rather just lug my 10 pounds of books everywhere.
And it's the little things. Like, I genuinely think that a lot of books I get through just because I'm turning the pages and I see, oh, I'm actually getting through it. Like, I can see the end in sight. And
Right.
it at least personally, it definitely gives me that reward satisfaction much more when I'm turning the pages and
Right.
using it, because then I'm like, it's almost that little like badge that you can give yourself, like, woo, see, this is it.
So you're probably like a kinesthetic learner.
Oh, I don't even know what that means. What is that?
So okay, so the teacher in me is gonna come out.
Perfect.
So we all learn, there are like 4 main ways that people learn, like visual, auditory, and kinesthetic is one of them. And that one's like you learn by doing, like you're very hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right. That's why I said that.
Good
You're
to know.
probably you learn by actually doing and being into the activity.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So I'm curious as to how you treat your books. Which side are you? Do you fold the corners of the page, or you're like, it's pristine, it looks like I never even touched it?
I've evolved a lot in my ways of dealing with them. It really depends. I used to fold all the pages in my book, but I'm a really big note taker. I come from the French high school system, which is really focused. It's very heavy on reading in general. It's heavy on literature, and it's heavy on creating like your own notes to learn things. Like basically for any topic or lessons, they would teach us like, okay, make your own note card separately. Your book. Yeah, and then like separately also like write a whole card about it and kind of have that organized that way. And they taught us a lot of hacks that I use throughout college and still to this day. So I have my own almost like annotation system. Yeah. Where it's like, okay, underlining means one thing, squaring it off means another, circling means one thing.
I love
and that. It's helped me with both fiction and nonfiction. Right. Nonfiction in the sense where there's certain key things that I've learned. I took this law program when I was in high school that said that you have to write the main word of each paragraph, like what it's about, in the side, so that when you're going through it again, but just one word, which is really hard to do sometimes. But that's a great way, just when you write it down as well, to have it more imprinted in your brain, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I even brought some, I think this book, Cultish, is a nonfiction book, and this is the last book that I've, like, really heavily annotated, and I know because I wanted to lend it to a friend, and I was like, I think I literally have, like, every page marked on. Oh, my God.
Okay, I'm, like, super happy right now, because I'm also on this side of the, like, I write in my books, I highlight, I, like, do different color pens, I fold the pages, and a lot of my friends are not like that at all, to the point where they won't let me books because they're afraid like I'm gonna bend the spine, and I'm just like, you know what, don't lend it to me, because
I think if a book is too pristine, it means that I didn't necessarily enjoy it,
right?
Enough.
Like it didn't grow with me, because you don't see my my imprint in there. It's the way I think about it, but I understand people like to keep their things nice.
I used to try to write the quotes that I really liked separately in a notebook, and it worked for a while, but then I found that I was just interrupting myself reading so often that I would have to, and then I tried to write the notes at the very end of the book, but then you have to go back through like 300 pages and write all of these things out. I was like, I need a better system, so I started just like highlighting them, and I still need to find the best way to like really find the places to save good quotes and things like that. So if anybody has ideas, let me know.
I mean, I don't have any either. I do what you do. I highlight. If something really like sticks out, I'll transfer it to like my journal but then you move on to another notebook, so that quote got lost. And, and you're
exactly.
just like, oh my God, I need to walk around with these quotes just hanging all around me, because they mean so much to me. So I wanted to ask you, obviously we can tell that books play a big role in your life, but is there anything else, anything deeper than just, what it means to you?
In terms of the stories of reading,
anything, the whole thing. Like what other roles do books play in your life? I mean,
I think one thing that I found has really helped me with reading overall is not necessarily it being a constant factor in my life. Like I especially with literary reviews, the questions that I get asked the most are, how can I read more, and like how many books do you read a month, and kind of this idea of quantity. I don't want to say quantity over quality, but that quantity is very important, when the truth is I'll go through months where I just can't pick up a book, I can't look at it, and that goes for everybody because of life, right? Yeah. For better or for worse, when you're having a lot of fun, you're just busy and you're going out, especially in Miami. Like imagine you're going to the beach, you're seeing your friends, you're traveling. It may not be the time when your mind is just ready to settle down, but also in those kind of negative moments, like you're working a lot and you're tired. And I mean, like I was saying, I get way too many existential crises. And so I feel like it'll go through a like loop peak, right? So it's like, okay, things are starting to go bad in my head more than anything. And it's like, I'm really busy with work and I'm starting to question everything about myself, about what I'm doing, about everything around me. And I'll kind of hit that peak where I'm like, okay, everything is going wrong. But then you kind of get that moment where you start to come back to your reality of like, being grateful, being happy, noticing those good things again. And I think as soon as I hit that kind of going back down phase, it's this phase where I feel very lost, but very calm. And I think that that's when books have played a really key role in my life, because there have been a lot of moments where I would have a lot of questions in my head, or I just didn't know how to formulate them, who to ask, or that I needed inspiration, but I didn't know what it was. And I would randomly pick up a book and I was like, this was it. And I know when I was in high school too, there was like anybody, right, is kind of figuring out who am I, what am I doing, what's going on. And I remember picking up Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke, and it's a series of letters, so it's literally questions and answers. And I was like, these are all my questions, here are some answers.
Exactly.
And there have been a lot of moments like that where you just pick up a story and it just gets you in that right spot, right? And it helps you feel kind of at peace with yourself. Again, opens up the scope of what you were thinking about and almost throws you back into the world with a fresh perspective.
It gives you a little push.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I don't think that my reading has been constant in any way. It's just that it's what I go back to when I need guidance that I need to find by myself, right? When it's not a moment that you can turn to your friends, to your partner, to your family for.
Right.
So
it's so interesting that you say that, because a lot of people think that to be a reader, you have to be reading all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like any other hobby. It's whenever you need to do it, you know? At least that's how it is for me.
There's
like,
that such a strong connotation with like the bookworm idea
Yeah.
that I think people really picture like a recluse that's just in bed and reading. And there's some people that are like that, and that's totally fine. But for me, that has never been the case. Like there's so much that I enjoy doing.
Right.
And I mean, that's even what I realized and what has been the greatest asset in community building through literary reviews or on my own or with the Brickle Book Club. I found that reading didn't just connect me to readers, right? It connected me to people that were curious and that wanted to do different things and experience different things.
Right.
So it's like book was the starting point, but then it's people that enjoy culture, sports, anything that's going on in their city and beyond. And so that's how you find like your people, kind of.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. You already told us a little bit about your family history. So where are you from, Emily?
So I'm French American. I was born in Paris in France, and then I grew up mostly in Italy. I was there for about 12 years. I was in school in Switzerland for 2 years, and then I went to University of First in New York, and I moved to Miami about 3 years ago for work.
And we're so lucky you're here. This is
it
awesome. So what has been your experience here so far?
I mean, I really love the city. I think that even just in the 3 years that I've been here, I've seen it change so much.
That's
I
true.
think that coming from, like, in my family, there's a big mix of, like, okay, you need to not have a purpose, but you kind of, right? Like, you need to find what your personal purpose is. Like, what are you interested in? What do you want to pursue? You always have to have a goal that you're working towards, but it doesn't mean you have to have, like, oh, I want to be the CEO of some company. It can be, like, you just have to have projects and things going on.
Purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And within that purpose, there's kind of a mix of you need to be able to work on them and to actually pull through and kind of keep that grind going, but also a very strong focus on style and way of life. And I think it's a mix of, the French side and having even that Italian side too, where growing up, life was about those moments with the people around you, about that moment when, you walk outside and the sun hits your skin, and those little simple
things.
Pleasures. Yeah.
Right.
Especially my dad is the ultimate Frenchman. So in France, quality of life is everything, and you don't live to work, which is something very different from the US, especially in New York. I mean, I love my time in New York, and it pushed me, and it taught me like how you can maximize yourself, how you manage your time, how you manage, because it's not just managing your time for your career, it's also managing the social sides, and going out and doing a lot. But I would just hit those points where I would be in school and interning and going out and doing all these things, and then I would go home to visit my family and not leave my room for about a week. My dad would always tell me when I arrived through the door, he was like, you're green. Like, your skin is green, you need to go get some rest and, like, chill out. And I think that when I was coming towards my last years of university too, and I was seriously thinking about, okay, what do I want to do? And I was lucky enough to be at a great internship at the time that I knew I could kind of continue. But I also felt that a lot of the people around me, when I would ask them about how long have you been in New York, how do you like it, like they would love it, but all of them would keep saying like, but I want to get out, and next year I'm moving, and next year I'm moving, and it never really happened. And it's a very addictive city, and it's really fun. But I just felt if I don't leave now, I'm never going to do it. And if I leave, I can always come back, but I just feel that if I don't give myself the chance of doing something different now, I don't know if I'll risk taking a leap later.
Wow, that takes a lot of, like, strength, though, to be able to recognize something like that and make that decision. Good for you.
Thanks. I mean, Miami was just literally an idea in my head at the beginning. I've always loved Latin culture because it reminds me a lot of, like, the warmth of Italy that I had growing up, but then it was still something slightly different, right? Like, it was still a little bit of unknown, and I always like a little bit of something where you're still always, like, figuring things out as you go, right? And so I really like the Latin culture, the music, 100%. Like, it's like I'd rather live in a city where Latin music is everywhere instead of me having to find, like, the 3 or 4 places that will actually play the music. And at the beginning, it was just searching companies in Miami.
Wow.
And I got really lucky during my last year because with my program, we had to write a thesis. So I remember that December holiday, I went home for Christmas. And so I had this idea, like, okay, before I start working on my thesis, I'm going to apply to a ton of jobs and get it out of the way. I applied to one internship at CNN Miami, which was CNN also in Español.
Sí.
And I sent it out, didn't apply to anything else, got lazy. Came back, then got busy with, like, my thesis, my internship, not forgot about it, but kind of was like, okay, I haven't heard back, so put it on the back burner. If I stay in New York, totally fine. If something else comes up for Miami, great, I'll keep looking. And one day at work, I literally got a call out of the blue being like, hi. And I missed the first call, so it was a voicemail being like, hi, this is whoever from CNN. I was just calling you to do your interview. So all of a sudden, I remember, and I was at my internship that morning, and then I went to a class in the afternoon. So I started Googling CNN interview questions, which thank God I did, because I actually found kind of like a blog of listings for questions.
Like
and one of them was like, make sure that you can answer what major stories you're following at the moment. And so the next day, and it was so casual, she just called me, and at first I thought it was the call to set up a time for an interview. It was just the interview. And so we did a short interview, then she switched to Spanish, and she asked me, what story are you following at the moment? And there was a lot going on with Venezuela at the time. Sí. Entonces le expliqué todo de, bueno, estoy siguiendo mucho lo que está pasando en Venezuela, eran muchos problemas con migración y cosas que pasan, bueno,
gracias a Dios que no te trabaste.
Sí.
Because sometimes, like, I don't know if that happens to you, but, like, if in my head something is happening in English and all of a sudden I have to switch, forget it. It's like word salad.
I remember I was in my apartment by myself, and I was shaking, like, straight up, like, my whole body was shaking. And then she told me the next day that I had gotten it, and I remember it was like a 3-month internship for minimum wage in Miami, and I had to call my mom and be like, do you think that it's a good deal, like a good idea for me to just go to Miami for 3 months and try out? I was like, I don't know what I'm getting into. I don't know anybody there. None of us do. And I don't know what this role is going to be like. It's in Spanish.
So you are a true transplant.
I mean, I'm really lucky.
Girl.
No,
Oh
thank God, like, my mom is the most supportive person ever, and she was like, yeah, of course, like, I'll help you figure it out. I don't think I could have done it without that, so.
That's amazing.
But going back to what I was saying about quality of life, like, I think that Miami just has that great balance of you're here and you're enjoying all the things in life. Like, you enjoy the sunshine, you enjoy the beach, you enjoy spending time with your loved ones, you enjoy good food. But what's been also a positive side of the pandemic is that we've had an influx of people from all over. And I feel like there's such a boom right now in Miami of not just financial companies, tech companies, but also creative people and creative spheres and projects that are coming from New York, from LA, from Latin America, from Europe, of people that are really seeing this benefit of, this is a city where I can enjoy my life and also be who I want to be and excel at my career, even working remotely. Like, it really doesn't even matter where your headquarters are anymore. anymore. So now it's like I'm seeing projects like yours and more all around where they're mixing art and culture and books, but then they'll also have a crazy element of like cryptocurrency or tech in it. And you're like, I don't know if it makes sense, but it works and it's cool. So I think that the city's still growing and it has a long way to go, but I think that that's the most exciting side of it, essentially.
I have to completely agree with you. Obviously, I'm biased because I grew up here.
Okay, I was going to ask, are you from Miami?
Yeah, I mean, I was not born here. I was born in Cuba, but I grew up here. Yes. So, like I said, I'm biased, but
But that's good. You should be.
Right? You know, and this is how we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but how this Miami Lit was born is because, you know, we travel and at least in my experience, it's always like, oh my God, you're from Miami. And it's either like, wow, that's great. Or, oh, really? You're from Miami? So we have this reputation of either being awesome or just like this flip-flop beach town and
like party destination too. For a long time that was kind of, and still to a certain extent, the rep, but I feel like now
there's
that's broadening.
so much more going on here that has always been going on here, and now people, like you said, are coming and they get to really see that we are much more than just like party and beach and drink and whatever else. So I'm so happy that you're here. I'm happy that you chose Miami.
So where in Cuba are you from?
Havana.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And then how old were you when you moved here?
10. I was 10, yeah.
Have you gone back?
No.
Yeah, it's complicated.
No.
I wrote my college thesis on Cuba, so I was there for 3 months working there too.
Where did you go, Havana?
Yeah.
Did
Havana,
you like
and then traveled around a bit. Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was intense. Like, it was intense to be there, to live there.
So what year was
see everything
this?
going on. 2000. I graduated in 2018. So I think it was probably just the summer right before that.
Okay.
2017 then.
I haven't been there. Well, I haven't been there since 1995.
Wow. Yeah.
So you've seen more than I have.
And it changed. So I had gone one time before. I think my second year of college, and just within like that short gap of like a year and a half, so much had changed. So I can't even imagine, especially with everything that's been going on lately.
Right.
You know, going back now. So
yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah,
hopefully
it's a tough
it'll
topic,
work out.
But
Yeah, it's sad, but yes, I was born there, and I came here when I was 10, and it was interesting. To say the least, but
did you speak English when you came here, or did you learn it here?
No, I learned here.
That's
but
amazing.
I had like kind of like a background because my parents gave me an American name or an English name.
Okay, yeah.
You know, spelled in English and everything. So that was interesting, going to school and nobody being able to read my name over there. Not here, over there.
Right.
Yeah, like when I started school, everyone, like the teachers, nobody could say my name properly. It was so frustrating. And then, you know, just like the political aspects, I didn't really have. I have good memories growing up there, but not like usual kids do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember playing out in the streets. I wasn't allowed to do that. My family is, we have a strong background in anti-Castro activities, so it was like the whole, you know, like you don't belong here type of thing. So when my parents always did a good job in exposing us to American culture, having us watch movies, listen to music. So when I came here, it didn't really feel like a big change in that sense. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I know, I know that
you have
movie.
the references.
I know that Michael Jackson song. I know that Beatles music. So it was nice in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really crazy how in Cuba you see not just American influences, but you see roots of history there. Like, you see the Russian cars. Yeah. But then one thing that I didn't know is they have a huge Alliance Française, like l'Alianza Francesa, that's there teaching French. Yeah. So many Cubans that born and raised there, you know what I mean, that hadn't had the opportunity to travel, would be like, oh my gosh, you're French. I would start talking to me in French. And I'd be like, what? This is crazy.
It's true. It's true. And there's a lot of like different pockets in the communities of people that come from different cultures. Like, you'll have like the French Cubans, the Jewish Cubans, the Italian Cubans, the Spanish Cubans, the Chinese Cubans. So it's like a whole like hodgepodge of people. So it's interesting for sure. But how awesome that you were there for 3 months, you said?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I was doing, well, it was right when they were starting to kind of explore the idea of allowing people to have private businesses.
Right.
So that applied to Airbnb, restaurants, but then also little independent projects that you could basically have as a business.
Right.
And that's what my thesis topic was on. But I knew that I didn't want to go there for 3 months just with my hands in my pockets. So I was able to intern for a gallery there called Galleria Continua, which was amazing because, again, connected me with that creative community of Cuba. And what's really interesting about the art world in Cuba is that it's one of the spheres or sectors that, not that it was not regulated, it was always regulated, but maybe had a little bit more advantages than others, even at the worst times of dictatorship or closure, because like any country, you're very proud and you want to showcase your achievements, and art is a great way to do that. So again, there's flaws and discrepancies in how they did it, and there was bias and all of that, but they were still sending art and artists from Cuba around the world, which was a privilege that a lot of people from that time didn't have. And so still to this day, you see a lot of interactions with Cuba through the world of art. But it was definitely complicated to be there in the position that I was in, because I was not there as a tourist, in the sense that I would have friends that would come back and be like, oh my gosh, it was great, we saw the beaches, we ate this amazing seafood every day, and all these things where you can do it because they still had the CUC and CUP, so like the Cuban peso and the Cuban peso converted to dollar, basically. So there were still the two currencies, but if you were Cuban, you really only had the CUP, the Cuban peso, and if you were person there, like a tourist there, you were much more likely to have access to dollars and convert those, and that could go a longer way. But then the world around me was Cuban, so it would be friends with who I would just go to their home and things like that. So there's no inviting anybody to restaurants, there's none of that, and I would just, my schedule was kind of going along with theirs. So there were days where it's just, you just eat once a day, and there's days where you go with the flow, and it's a lot of the same meals. And again, like, I was just at such a weird position in between the two, because Cubans have their ration cards, which is not nearly enough, obviously, for food, but I still didn't have access to that. So then my only option was supermarkets, which are really overpriced. And then I get there and they see me and they're like, okay, here's the like foreigner's price. You know?
So you got to really see the whole picture.
It was
that must have been overwhelming.
I think I realized it the most when I got back. So the first time I was there, I was only there for 2 weeks, and it was when Obama was doing his visit there. And I remember I had extended it for that second week, so I ended up staying with a family that I had met there, this really amazing lady that became my friend, and she's a mom, had a young daughter. She's like, you can stay with us. But it's a dirt house, like in the middle of Havana, but a dirt house, nothing special. And so spending time with them and being there with them, again, like having our kind of like once a day meal, and then going out and doing my own things, and then suddenly coming back, and my connection was through the airport in Mexico City, which is a huge airport, suddenly being connected to internet again and all of that. It was just this influx of, as we were talking about, influx of information, of connectivity. And I just felt such a loss in between like those worlds. So it was definitely interesting. And I'm a very independent person, so to be there and to need somebody Cuban with me to help me run the most basic errands or to do the most basic things, or always having to rely on somebody else to explain something to me or to guide me. I mean, aside from humbling me a lot, but was also challenging because, you know, you want to be able to go and run your errands or, you know, get milk for the morning, something like that by yourself.
Something simple that you
and
should
I had
be
to
able
rely
to do.
and I had to rely on, and thank God I had an amazing network. Like the girls at the gallery were amazing, and everybody's so supportive, and I'm not the one that needed help in that situation, but was like the one that had to live through it. And they were still there for me and supportive. So it was intense, but
that sounds like such an overwhelming experience, but one that must be like once in a lifetime type of thing.
Yeah, I think that you learn a lot about resilience there. You learn a lot about care, and there's so much of that has been translated to Miami too, not just with Cubans, but with Latin Americans in general, and on a broader scope immigrants in general from anywhere. You know, you come, if you moved, you generally move for a reason.
Right.
So it's interesting to see how people kind of take that narrative and shape their lives with it.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. Emily, I didn't know I was going to get this deep.
Me neither.
So let's bring it back a little.
Yeah.
How do you find the time to read? Now that we went.
Yeah, we went by. Let's come back to the basics.
Yes.
I think that finding time to read is like anything. When you enjoy something, you have to make time for it, right? Start with the basics, meaning for me, it's about whenever I go through like a really big reading block or kind of period where I just can't focus, start with something that you really want to read. And that can be anything. It can be a romance novel, it can be a magazine, it can be a cookbook, but don't listen to what people are saying. Don't listen to, oh, you need to read nonfiction, you need to learn, you need to self-develop.
Right.
That's
all these rules.
It doesn't matter. Start with something that you enjoy. It can be something small, it can be a long book, but really kind of like find your groove. It can be rereading a book that you really like. That's always a great way to set the tone because then you feel like you achieved something, right?
Yeah.
And then other than that, I think that we associate reading to such a big task, but reading happens in those little moments in life.
Yeah.
So it can be mornings that's just like those really nice, slow mornings when you take your time to make your coffee and you have your amazing like toast breakfast that's really simple but just makes you so happy.
Right.
And I'm so lucky to have a balcony, so I'll go and I'll sit out on my balcony and you can read for 10 minutes. You don't need to block out hours of time, especially now that our attention span is kind of shorter. Just take those little moments, and lunch breaks are good, evenings are good, just finding those little breaks and starting with short periods of time and starting with 10 minutes, increasing it when you really feel like it, going down when you don't. I mean, it should still be an intention, right? Like you want to think about it, but finding the things that you enjoy, making the time for it, and just kind of sticking to it ultimately. Like once you start a story, I feel like you want to know the end, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't enjoy the book, just put it down.
That was my next question.
Right?
Has that ever happened to you where you're just like, I can't get through this?
Yeah. And there's also books I just don't understand, especially with, and even when it comes to like literary prizes books and all of that, it could be me, it could be the book, it doesn't matter. But if it's not a good fit.
Or just like not the right time in your life.
Yeah,
because that has
so
happened
true.
to me as well. Like I've started a book and I'm just like, I can't. What is this? I'm not connecting. I can't read this. And then some years will go by. I'll pick it up and it's like a magic, like a switch went off. And all of a sudden I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it. And it's like, what happened? Did I grow up? I don't know.
Yeah.
Did I grow into this book?
The first time I was kind of told about that concept of, I guess, the book for a specific time in your life, I can't remember, but I had a teacher that said that Swan's Way by Proust, which is a long kind of series of books, but that everybody associate with almost the peak of literature. I haven't read it, so I don't know. But I remember him saying, like, oh, I tried to read Proust when I was really young, could never get into it, and then later in life picked it up, and I felt like this was my life and how I was looking at it, but from the point of view of adulthood and like this point in my life, and now I'm able to look back and connect the dots. But if I had really pushed myself before to finish it, it wouldn't have had that same meaning. Yeah. So that was really kind of like those little things that really open up your eyes. You know?
Yes,
like,
it's true. Do you ever read the same book more than once?
I've tried to. I haven't succeeded yet. So I don't think I have. I've definitely started books, put them down, and then pick them up later. So I don't know if that would count as a reread. But
I guess it can.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you read books multiple times?
Sometimes I do. It's like how you were mentioning earlier. You go through a period where you don't read, and all of a sudden you want that like kick to get back into it. That's usually when it'll happen. It's like, oh my god, like I'm in the mood for really, enjoying myself. Or who was I talking to about this? Oh, I think with Mitchell Kaplan from Books and Books, we were talking about one of the last books I read recently was Flowers in the Attic, which I've read like 4 times already. And it's like, I don't know what this says about me. I don't know if you've read it, but it's like a bit of a dark book.
Okay.
It's like a psychological, I don't want to say thriller, but it's like a psychological it's just messed up. That's the only way I can put it. But it's written in such a way that I can't stop. And no matter how many times I read it, I'm always like, this happened to these people? Oh my goodness.
So, okay, the thing that I'm really curious about when it comes to rereads is, do you feel like it's different each time you read it? Or is it more the familiarity of it?
I think it's a combination of both. It's like, okay, like I know what's going to happen. I know what emotions I'm going to have. And I know that I'm going to notice something that I never noticed before.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So it can happen with, something meaningless like Flowers in the Attic, or something a little bit deeper like The Kite Runner. Like every time I reread that book, I'm always walking away with, something heavy that I hadn't noticed before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, I now that I think about it, I do reread books a lot.
But that's
Maybe
good.
that's why my to-be read list is so long, because I keep going back to the same books.
No, but it's definitely something I want to do more of too. And I know that I have that feeling so many times while I'm reading. Like, okay, I know that I'm getting it, but I know that I need to reread this to really get it. I mean, I'll go back to nonfiction more so to like remember the themes or the topics or kind of things that I learned about too, but it's not the same. So,
it's true. It's not the same.
That'll
so
be
now that we're talking about your to-be read list, how do you manage your list? I know that was a question someone had.
I wish there was a process and that there was order, but I'm 100% a mood reader.
Yeah.
I think that I also am constantly surrounded by my books. So I feel like I look at them, and not that I think about them, but I kind of make like mental notes about them as I go. Like, oh yes, that book is about that. Like I really want to get to it, and I really want to get to it. And same for multiple ones. So yeah, it just kind of depends. I'll pick them up based off of what I feel like, especially between like first nonfiction, fiction, and then start it off, see how it goes, and kind of change my mood from there. But Bookstagram has changed a lot of that just because, and this has been amazing, but a lot of publishing companies have really great programs for Bookstagrammers for you to receive like early edition of books or, uncorrected arcs and things like that, which as a book lover is the dream. Like you feel like an insider.
So cool.
Like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I get to read this with little errors,
Right.
And I like, so it's so cheesy to say, but I'll be like, oh, here's a little typo. I know they'll fix it, but I feel good that I found it.
Right.
So that has kind of shifted everything around, because now it's like I get this influx of books too and things that are new, but I want to make sure that I balance and don't disrespect my to-be-read pile on the side. So it's a mix of both.
Cool.
But definitely with the moods. Sometimes you have really good surprises, and sometimes
I'm the same way. Yeah, it's like I have a list, but it's really whatever I feel in the moment. Who cares? I'll try to check it off at some point in my life.
I literally change my stacks around me too, even if it's books that I haven't read. But so it's like I have the ones on my desk, the ones by my bed, the ones just right under the TV. So I'm literally staring at them a lot of the time. And sometimes I just mix them up for inspiration, or to be like, this is the order that I think I'll get to in the next 2 years.
Hopefully. If I don't change my mind again. Do you keep all your books?
I give a lot of my books away. So I'm definitely that person that will tell you, like, if you see something in the house, take it, please. Yeah. So I have a lot of bookworm friends that I do not let leave the house without a stack of books. And then around the city, too, I mean, you can donate books to the Miami-Dade Public Library. There's a little free library in Brickell right next to the Miami-Dade Heritage Trust, which is good. Yeah. Thanks to Literary Views, I found out about a nonprofit called Bookleggers, which accepts donated books, and their mission is basically to promote community by giving out free books. So they're a great resource as well, but I keep the books that have really impacted me, that I have a personal link with, and I'll send those home and basically tell my family to stash them. My grandmother has my books. Yeah. But other than that, I really try to keep it circulating too. That's awesome. Also because I've traveled and I moved a lot, and that is the worst habit to have as a book reader, because they're heavy and they're literally the biggest thing to lug around, but it's worth it.
Have you ever given a book away that you've later regretted? Like, oh, I should have kept that.
Yes, and surprisingly, it's books that I've read, but it's usually because I want to give it to somebody else, or because I want to suggest it or recommend it or something like that, and I'll have lent it to somebody and it goes away.
It never came back?
Yeah. So there's things like that where at least the only thing that gets me through is I'll be thinking, I'm like, I just hope they actually read it. If they read it, it's okay. Like, I will take it as a loss, and it's totally fine. If they haven't,
Do you lend books?
I think I've just become okay with the fact that if you're gonna
They're
lend
not
a book,
gonna
you're
come
just
back.
giving it.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where now when people return them to me, I'm like, wow, thank you so much. Like, that's so nice of you. And then it just kind of urges me to keep it going, you know?
Right.
So, yes, I lend books, but it's usually giving books. And I know that because I keep all the books that my friends lend me. So, it's my fault, too.
It's just part of the deal. Like, you don't lend, what's that saying? You don't lend your car, money, or books. Something like that. I don't think I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah, one of my best friends still jokes, but a couple years ago she lent me a book and I literally took it home to Switzerland with me and just left it there with the idea that, like, if I bring it back, I have to give it back to her. But I still haven't read it, so what do I do?
Exactly.
She still brings it up to this day, but it's
That's
okay.
so funny.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I wanted to talk to you about book events in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was another question from one of your lovely followers.
Well, I mean, starting off with the Brickle Book Club. The Brickle Book Club was, again, another lockdown project. I was kind of trying to find creative ways to get literary reviews out there, either through stories or things like that. And again, it was a great moment because people really wanted to have book suggestions. So I was reaching out to a lot of pages saying, hey, could I do some kind of story takeover or something curated to your brand and your aesthetic, but that's related to this. And I reached out to a page in Brickle called Brickle Living because we had been in touch before about something book related, and he mentioned like the idea of a book club as well, that it was something that would have been like really necessary, but he didn't know how to do it and how to manage it. I was like, I got you. I can do this. I've never done it, but I'll figure it out. Like you said, learning as you go. That's clearly my thing. But he really helped me promote it at the beginning. And so the Brickle Book Club started totally during lockdown, a bunch of strangers on WhatsApp and on Instagram. And so the idea was to alternate a fiction and nonfiction book every month and a half or so. It's not necessarily hardcore proficient readers. It's people who enjoy, but also a lot of people that want to read and that want to start reading. So I try to pick books that are really geared towards that audience where it's interesting and you're going to learn, and like it's still a challenge, right? But it's not like the ultimate literary kind of like soul-wrenching read. At the beginning of lockdown, what was really interesting too is I would get a lot of messages or just in the chat saying like, oh, I just moved to Miami. I don't know anybody here and everything's closed. So it was a really great way for people to connect. I still do the meetings for it by Zoom because I think that's the best way to communicate for a book club. Like you're home, you're cozy, you get to talk about things that you like, and it kind of keeps it simple. And recently I've started to try to do more events surrounding it. So it can be anything from little meetups. We're actually coming up on 1 year of the Brickle Book Club in September. So hopefully doing a happy hour to celebrate that. But I know that, thank God, the Miami Book Fair is coming back in November, and it's going to be in person and virtual. And Books and Books has an amazing roster of events that they do virtually. I'm not sure if they're doing a lot of in-person again.
I think they're slowly
getting easing back into it.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of resources there too. But again, I've seen a lot of people kind of take matters into their own hands and do their own book events as well. So as far as I know, that's kind of what I've been following and keeping up with. But I'm definitely the first to promote and share any book events, cultural events, or, you know, kind of community events where you can support one another. So
that's awesome. So yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone here is aware of literary views, but if you're not, we will post it in the description below so they can check out, because you do always you post a lot of stuff that's going on. So it's a great resource. So now that we went full circle and we got back to reading, what is your favorite book? I know that's a big question.
Impossible questions. I know we were talking about it last night before coming too, so I literally had to bring a stack with me because I think that's the easiest way for me to talk through them. So I brought a few different ones. This is one of those books that I found kind of in a moment of need. It's called The Elegance of the Hedgehog. This is my French copy. It's by Muriel Barbery. I don't know how to do it, but it's a really great story about this concierge woman of a building in France, a really young girl that is going through her existential crisis and a little depressive, and an older man that lives in the building, and how their three lives kind of come together. And the concierge's whole theme is that she wants to disappear in the world. She doesn't want people to notice her, but she's actually very smart, very like a critical thinker, but she just wants everybody to leave her in peace. And then she has these people like the young girl and the man that just keep kind of reaching out to her, and it's how their lives intertwine. And it's just a nice insight, into how things and people come into your life, and how
That's
they
so
kind
cool.
of
I've
come
never
together.
heard of that. Okay, that's going on
There's
my list.
also there's a movie about it, which a girl from Bookstagram told me about as well, and I've been looking for it everywhere, but it just shows not available, so it's been driving me crazy. It's apparently called The Hedgehog, so if I find it, I'll send you the link.
Please do.
This is a book that I got in Paris, December 2020, when I went back to see my mom too. It's called Lover's Discourse by Xiaolu Guo. And it's really interesting because she writes in a very poetic way, but it's about this Chinese girl in the UK, her experience being in England, but also having a British boyfriend. And I think that one of the most interesting points that she makes is about those thoughts, feelings, and things that get lost in translation from one culture to another, because each culture will have their specific words to describe a feeling, expressions that just don't make sense if you don't have the background. And I thought it was so interesting to see that, one, in the context of a relationship, right? Because she'll say that she'll get into an argument with her boyfriend or something like that, and she just can't translate how she's feeling because it's this one specific word in Chinese that they just don't understand or have in English. And I found that that's so true, especially for English, which is an almost like minimalistic language, it feels, in comparison especially to Romance languages, French, Italian, Spanish, and more. Yeah. But there's so much that just doesn't get filtered with that context. And I think that we see it a lot in Miami too. Like, we have such a mix of experiences and people, and sometimes you understand and you learn, and sometimes you don't, and that's kind of okay too.
That's so interesting.
That was a really nice point. This is one of the books that I would really like to reread, called Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. She actually originally wrote it in Italian and then translated it to English, which I thought was kind of a curious fact.
That is
And
interesting.
it's literally just her thoughts, as if the way that I picture it when I'm reading, at least, is just kind of like walking around and this endless stream of consciousness that we all have. So it brought back a lot of personal experiences for me, because even though she never mentions a place specifically, it felt like Italy, right? So I felt my childhood, and I felt like those mornings when I would walk to school.
Wow, so you have a deeper connection.
Yeah, it really brought me back. So I think that was just amazing, and it's just, again, a stream of consciousness, and it just kind of felt nice to hear that from somebody else, and to see that all of those have shape and can lead you to, different ways of thinking, and I guess to a book. Yeah. Okay, and then last one. This is actually a book that's coming out September 7th, so that I was really lucky to get beforehand, but it's called Beautiful Country by Chen Julie Wang. And it's her story of her coming, again, from China as a young girl with her family and living as an undocumented immigrant in New York City, working in sweatshops there, going to school, the discrepancies of how she was viewed, not just because of being Asian, but because of everything going on in her background, poverty. And I mean, it was challenging to read, like, really to see those situations.
Yeah.
And again, going back to privilege, like, this puts everything into perspective. Even to the point where when she had the opportunity to go to a better school on scholarship, her dad would tell her, like, you need to fly under the radar. You're doing too much.
Because she's undocumented.
Yeah. So just like all those things where you think that, meters that are meters of social success for us just don't necessarily apply at all, or can almost be perceived as something negative.
Right.
But it's a challenging but really beautiful story, and I think she ended up going to Yale Law School and is a lawyer now and wrote this. So
this is like a memoir?
Yeah, a memoir, exactly.
Wow.
Oh, and then the book I was bringing up earlier, which is the book that I've recommended to so many people this year, but this one is nonfiction. It's called Cultish, and it's about the language of fanaticism. So how language shapes how and why we join cults and how we can stay in them or not. And it goes from, yeah. But she explores, it's a light read in the sense that she's clearly an academic and she knows about linguistics and how they affect our psyche and our history and everything beyond that, but she writes in a very clear way. So it feels like you're also reading about pop culture, right? But she covers everything from Scientology to SoulCycle and CrossFit and the nuances of
SoulCycle's in there too?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to read this now.
Yeah, and I used to work at SoulCycle too, like in the morning, so there's so much that I read through this and I was like, oh yeah, that does make sense. But it's basically like how language can shape your sense of community, whether you stay in a situation even though you perceive it as negative or not, and then just how language is used in the case of SoulCycle and CrossFit more for branding, right? Like ultimately it's just really good marketing. There's what she says in the end is it's different because you can leave whenever you want. There's no external pressure. There's no negative repercussions. So obviously it's not a cult in that sense, but it's just really interesting to see how much language and also that idea of social currency, like how you relate to people around you and how you showcase who you are to people around you can affect anything from cults to brands and more. And I think that applies to reading too. Like I feel like you can tell so much about somebody by what they read, but you can also tell so much about who they want to be or who they want to be perceived as based on what they read. I mean, and I say that having just shown a stack of books, so I'm sure that says a lot about me too. But I'll see some people reading and I'm like, are you reading that because you enjoy it or because like you feel like
someone
you should
told
know
you to
about
read
this?
it?
Yeah. Or, you know, are you, or on the positive side, like, are you reading that because you're trying to become this kind of person and all of that? So it's interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you now that you brought that up earlier. That was my question.
Hey, it came back though.
I think it came back. Yeah. Do you ever, is there a book or an author that you will not read in public? Like you read it only in private?
Wow, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. Do you have one?
I do.
And she whispers.
I'm ashamed. I don't know. Well, not necessarily. I don't know how I feel about it.
Okay.
Yeah. What was that book? 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay.
I refuse to read that book in public. I read it, though. I will say that. I read it, but I didn't want to read it in public.
Yeah.
Not because of the content, but because it was so badly written. Okay. It wasn't. I don't think the writing was very good. I wish it would have been a little bit more.
No, I remember I was in high school when it came out and my roommate had it and then passed me her copy. And same thing, I was very like, ooh, what is this? And like when you're in high school too, you're very like, ooh, something that's going to be like sexually like loaded. And then I read it and I just remember the scene where like the guy comes up is always the exact same.
Yes.
It's like,
and
oh,
then
and he's wearing jeans
her
and
internal
a t-shirt
monologue
and
is
like,
the same. Like if she calls herself Goddess one more time, I'm going to put my pencil through this book.
Yeah, I don't think I finished it. It was just...
I didn't finish it either. And it's a shame because I feel like it had potential, right? Like the theme, it's to me, it's still interesting to this day. Like how do you reconcile, these two opposing ideas and views? How do you put them aside just so you can have a connection with someone? So that's my one that I didn't want to read in public. Just because I didn't want people to think that I was reading a badly written book.
I think it's harder for books, like reading books in public when they're really popular too, or when there's a lot of controversy around it, because then everybody knows. Whereas most of the time people don't, not that they don't pay attention, like they can look, but they probably won't know or won't relate. Or are there any authors that are like really popular or really famous that you either don't like or that you grew to like or...
that I don't like? I don't think so. I'm like, it's like chocolate. Like I like all of them and I find something to like about each one of them, even
the
if
thrill is in the variety.
Yeah, it's like I'll have it all. So no, I don't think there's one that I don't like. Do you have one that you don't like?
I don't know. I see a lot of controversies over like books around. That's why I was asking too, but I don't know. I think the first time I really came into contact with an author that was traditionally like recognized as, an amazing author all around and that I didn't enjoy at first was Joan Didion. I think I read, I'm not sure if this is the title, so if I misquote it, sorry, but something like East and West, and it was about her experience in California, and I just couldn't get into it at all. But then I remember there was a Netflix movie about her, and she had recently lost her husband, who was also a writer, and it was kind of about, the grief and the experience for her going through it. And what really touched me was that they were both writers and they lived together, so they kind of did everything together.
Yeah.
And I had never seen that kind of possibility of a connection where you can both be doing the same thing or be so in tune that you can be in the same space in your own world and then come together. And the way that she talks about him and at least made it seem like she leaned on him really touched me.
Right.
After that, I picked up her book, The Year of Magical Thinking. And that is, now that you mention also the favorite book, that's probably one of my favorite books.
Oh, nice.
Of all time. It's just, she deals with grief in sometimes like a very rational way, right? Like research and facts and understanding the process of it, and then in a very emotional way.
Right.
And I thought that breadth of emotion was really touching, especially after having that deeper context too of losing your husband, who's your partner to that extent.
Yeah, so that's like a monumental life experience.
Yeah. It's either that or, I think that for everybody, there's also a rite of passage when you see maybe your parents losing their parents, or I know I unfortunately had a lot of friends around me who at a really young age lost a parent or the other, and I just remember seeing how drastically that could change them from one day to the next, right? So I think that maybe that's why I was interested with the theme of grief from an early age. I've never been fascinated by the concept of death. Like, I'm not necessarily particularly worried with it.
Right.
But coming in contact with that and seeing how those kinds of losses, and I guess, like, as you would say now, trauma, would kind of affect you and shape you as a person. So that was a really interesting way to come in contact with the topic from a literary point of view as well.
That's true. It's a lot to think about. Do you have a favorite author?
Sorry.
Someone that you know, you don't even need to read the synopsis. Like, this is going to be good. I'm just going to read it.
I definitely should have prepared for that one beforehand. I think it's too hard to pick off the bat. I used to read, there was a while where I was really obsessed with Mario Vargas Llosa.
Sí.
Because I just loved the way that he would kind of put stories together, where each chapter would start and it would feel at the beginning like, what's going on, all these little details that are going to matter, but you don't know why, and then the chapter ends and it all comes together, and then it starts all over again with the next chapter, but then it all kind of comes and ties together. And I just see that it's such a huge challenge, especially when you think about it from the perspective of writing a novel. Like, I just picture Post-its everywhere and trying to put them in line and remember the details and tie all the loose ends together. So that was, to me at least, a clear example of, like, mastering your skill too.
Yeah.
But there are plenty more, and I probably just can't think of them right now. What about you?
Yes, I do have... I can mention one. There's, like you said, there's so many that you can go to. But Khaled Hosseini, all of his books, like, he's so amazing. The way that he tells people's experiences and how he can, like you said, just craft and weave between themes and even, female voices. He writes the female experience very well. So I really, really appreciate that. And that's so difficult, especially from the cultural perspective that he's coming from. He's from Afghanistan. So
yeah, I was going to say very relevant too.
And actually, I've read all of his work, but there's one book, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It's called The Thousandth Planet Suns. And that book, I
have it at home too. It's one of the ones
I can't finish.
Oh, really?
Not because it's not good, not for all the other reasons that I can't finish all the other books, but because it's so well written that it seems so real.
Oh, yeah.
And the experiences are so heavy that I can't do it.
Yeah.
So I have to go like little bits. Like, I'll read for a few minutes, cry my eyes out, go do something else, and then come back. Like, my husband one day, like, he comes into the room and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm not a person that's like a crier, you know, like I'll cry when I need to in the shower by myself. Nobody will know. So he's like, what happened to you? I'm like,
sobbing. Can't read through the ink.
He's like, okay.
Okay, I'm picking it up as soon as I get
You're
home.
okay. I'll just leave you to it. So yeah, that's. But his books are always like, I know it's gonna be good. It's gonna be a good experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, and I've seen him come up a lot lately, especially with everything going on in Afghanistan and all of that. So
yeah,
I literally have that book in my stand, so it's next.
Well, let me know.
Yeah.
Let me know how you.
I'm gonna call you in tears and be like, "Why did you do this to me?"
Actually, let me know when you started, and I'll start again, and maybe like the peer pressure, I will like.
Or if I can pull you through too, and you can call me, we'll just like cry on the phone for like 5 minutes. I'll be like, "Jenny, are you okay?" I'll be like, "Okay, me too. Let's keep going."
It's so crazy how a book can do that to you.
Yeah, seriously.
Right? Like, because it happens with movies, but I feel like I'll shed a tear and I'll forget about it. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But then with that book, it's in my head for like a while, and I just can't shake off the image. I won't say like, I won't ruin it for you, but yeah, his stuff is always good. What has been your favorite experience with Literary View so far? I know you've done some really cool stuff.
I have a few. I think first off was how much room it gave me for creativity, especially during, I mean, I'm tired of bringing it up, but during that lockdown period, I mean, my boyfriend and I would have these empty weekends, and it gave us an excuse to just create and do things, and it would be something as small as taking pictures of books, but it really kept us going. And what else can we do with it, and how can we play with it, and how can we learn different skills with it? Beyond that, as we kind of moved away from that situation and things started to open up, the connections through it, like really finding the people that I was looking for when I moved to Miami, because I moved here not knowing anybody, and then at first at work, there was just such a big age gap that as much as I love everybody that I work with and feel like I have really supportive coworkers, it's different when you have, kids in your life going on, so I understand. But being able to meet those people that share the same passions and aspirations that I do, that read, but that also, I mean, recently I was involved with these two girls who started their own company called Fika Creative Group, and they put on a sustainable fashion show called Segunda Mano. And the only way that it started was because they posted a story saying, if you're willing to help us out with this project, let us know. And I was like, absolutely. And just kind of finding a place for myself after that. And I moderated their panel for their discussion. And same thing, at that event, there were literally all the people that I had connected with through social media because I admired their projects, their brands, a lot of young women starting their own companies and starting their own magazines and starting all these amazing things by themselves that I'm just so in awe of them. And I felt like I could be there and like fangirl over them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm such a fangirl, especially of, young women in business or anything like that. And lastly, giving me the opportunity and kind of the excuse to carry out some of my own projects as well. I mean, we were talking about book events and all of that, but I just recently started doing the literary dinners, which was an idea that I was kind of carrying on for a long time. And I think the idea of like having a dinner to be able to connect and meet new people was always in the back of my mind as some kind of project for the last couple of years, especially having moved around a lot, right? Yeah. You get that recurring theme of how do I meet people?
Right.
But this really gave me a way, because I felt like I already had somewhat of a community that would be interested in it, and like we're all just like looking for ways to connect and bond more. Yeah. So the idea was really just, okay, let's have small dinners, like 10 to 12 people, because the point is not to have these huge events with everybody that you know and their mother and their grandfather. Yeah. Like it's just different, right? But to have those moments of community and really that. One-on-one to get to know each other. And I think a lot of people think that it's like a book club meeting. Not at all. The book is just the excuse. Yeah. Like the book is, what I'll do is, so I'll get usually 10 different books for everybody coming and place them on a seat. And the idea is you get to walk around, early bird gets the worm. You get to see what books are there.
So you get your pick.
Yeah, exactly. So you get your pick, and then it's a good way to start talking with your neighbors, right? Why did you pick that book? why do you like it? Then that'll give you cues. Oh, this person's interested in this person's interested in that. I've only done one so far, but it went really well. We ended up being at the restaurant for over 3 hours. And it was just crazy because at some point I looked around, right? And I was like, okay, I have like people that I know, but these are all total strangers to one another.
That's true.
And a lot of people, most of the people came by themselves that were just talking and getting to know each other. And especially for girls, to get to know other girls or even guys, but in a friend context. Like, I feel like it's always either, oh, you're going out because you want to date people, or like, oh, you know, it's kind of, how do you approach girls to be friends with girls? Like,
that's true.
It's such an issue,
true.
but it's
it
hard.
is.
And so to see these girls that all these people have a lot of the same interests, and they probably go to the same places and do the same things, but never had an instance to connect. And just last week, I think I saw 2 of the girls from the dinner that went out for drinks and told me like, oh, it was thanks to literary dinners. And
That's
I was like,
so
even
cool.
if I stop now,
oh my God,
I feel like I
that.
did like something cool.
I love
So
that.
the goal will be to have it once a month, ideally have different themes. Sometimes it'll be more bookish, maybe have some authors there. Sometimes it'll be more entrepreneurial, you know, maybe open it up to 20 people and make it more networking focused.
Right.
Kind of, I just want to play around with it. The idea is it's not my job, like it's a project, so it has to stay within that balance of fun and entertaining and something that I enjoy doing, while also making sure that it's an enjoyable experience for everybody around me.
That's
so you have to come
cool.
to the next one.
Well, I was just gonna say, I was trying to make it to the one that you just had.
Yeah? Oh,
yes,
that
but
makes
we
you
had
happy.
scheduling conflicts, so
No,
I
that's fine. And to be
couldn't
honest,
go.
like I did that not like last minute, but I ended up promoting it just for like the few days right before, which is also my fault. But I just need to, like with anything, start to find my system of how I'm going to do this in the future too. So over time,
I'm
people
super
will be able
excited
to
to come
more.
because
Okay,
it just sounds so cool and so fun. Like food and books, I'm there.
Right,
That's
what
me.
I thought
That's
too.
me.
Like
did
worst
you make
case
that for
scenario,
me?
you went to dinner and you went home.
Exactly. No.
Or like you really didn't connect with anybody, because I feel like obviously this one went well, but you're just bringing 10 strangers from the internet together.
That's
so
true.
who knows? But
That's true. I hadn't thought of that point. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I was gonna say book people have the stereotype of being loners, but that's not really the case always. Like I'll talk to the wall. It's okay. So
I just think you have to open the right box.
Yes,
right? And you see that little spark and people are like, you want to talk about this? Okay. And then it's like, how do I stop them?
And just the fact that you put the right bait, like the book, it's there. It's genius. I can't wait to go. It's gonna be super cool. I'm excited. Before we finish, because I feel like I've drained you.
No.
You're so eloquent and obviously so knowledgeable. Would you ever write a book?
A few people in my family have brought that up. One of my aunts is so funny, but she literally every time we talk, she either talks to me about writing a book, becoming a full-time writer, or going to law school. And she'll always be like, Emily, I really think you can do it. And I'm like, yes, but do I want to? I don't know. I love the idea of writing a book. I just don't feel, I mean, for the moment, I'm just kind of at that point where I'm like, what would I write about?
Right.
I don't know. I'd love to. I'd really, really love to. I'd like to first really get into journalism. Ideally, write a lot of articles. I have the worst writer's block, to be honest, for anything, which is crazy. But so kind of try to work through that with articles, journalism, and hopefully one day I hope I'll have a story that's good enough to tell in a book.
Oh my God, are you kidding? Just everything you've mentioned here, you have so much to say. But I understand about being in the right mental space and the right time. So when that comes, I think it's going to be fabulous. And I can't wait.
I hope so.
I can't wait to read it and be like, that's my friend. Because that's it. We're friends now.
You can be like, you heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll put the little sticker of it on the back of the book too, like approved by Miami Lit.
Oh my God. Can you imagine how exciting would that be?
That would be so cool.
I would die. That's it. It's over.
And then you can write a book about all the people that you interviewed here too. And you can be like, look at me interviewing a series of best-selling authors. And
oh my God. See, no, I leave the writing to you. Like, I think you would be great at it. I don't know if I would be great at it. Just to me, the process that a writer has to put themselves through
seriously
seems so daunting that I don't know if I want to put myself through that pain. Like, I'm not mature enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I have some growing up to do.
One of my favorite childhood authors, now I feel like I'm blanking on her name, Jacqueline Wilson, said that when she was in that phase of writing a book, she would wake up every morning around 5 and just sit down and write for at least 2 hours, and that was her method. I was like, girl, I don't know if I can do that.
I can't even no, I can't even
like
even
my
think
schedule
about it.
changes week to week in general. Like, how can you have that consistency, which is admirable, but my writing process will definitely, I already know it'll be chaos. So
yeah, it's like,
I'm
here, I have an
that.
idea.
Yeah.
Let me bust out my notebook and we'll see when I come
Tomorrow
back to it.
I may have a meltdown about it.
I'm going to go cry in the shower because it was not good enough.
Yeah. And I'm not like you. I cry a lot. Yeah. So.
Well, better out than in.
Yeah. I hope so. I really hope so.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you for making me so comfortable for great questions and answers and everything.
No, absolutely. And we'll have all the information linked down below if for people who are joining us on YouTube, and if you're listening to us.
I've never been on YouTube.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And if you're just listening to us, then go to Emily's Instagram, Literary Views, and you will get all the info there. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I hope everybody's having a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.